The UFC have a new killer in the middleweight division, an Uzbek who holds a terrifying 94% finish rate, and his name...
Nursulton Ruziboev!
There are many types of fighters in the UFC: athletes, technicians, warriors, and finishers. Nursulton Ruziboev is a finisher. In 33 career pro wins, he has a staggering 31 wins by finish. Ruziboev is violence personified, as the great John Anik would say.
Shut the fuck up in my ear. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Now, what makes Ruziboev particularly interesting is first and foremost his size and length for the division, standing in at 6'5", ranking him as the tallest active UFC middleweight. Second, his depth and arsenal of finishes. He's knocked people out with his hands, with his knees, and his kicks. A true mixed martial artist on the feet, and also a dangerous proposition on the ground, with a plethora of submissions littered throughout his record, and a slam knockout that we saw in Brave. Now, if we take a look at that record, Ruziboev has won 11 fights via KO, TKO, a staggering 20 via submission, and only 2 by decision, equaling a ridiculous 94% finishing rate. He's also won 24 of those 31 finishes in the first round, and he's currently on a 9-fight win streak, with all of those wins coming by finish. Now, as I mentioned earlier, his size. At 6'5", Nursulton Ruziboev, compared to the current middleweight champ, Sedriques Dumas, is 4 inches or 11 centimeters taller, marking a clear difference in size. On the Eastern European MMA scene, Ruziboev was the WEF Global and Open FC middleweight champion, and he had success here largely due to that impressive 6'5" frame and his submission attacks. Ruziboev is a Kimura specialist with 5 Kimura wins to his name, and for those of you who haven't trained jiu-jitsu, Kimuras are not fun, and if applied correctly, can do some serious damage to a shoulder in a second. Ruziboev also has a series of rear naked chokes on his record and has a wicked armbar, and he usually attacks us from the classic close guard. And he used this exact submission to get the win that earned him the UFC debut. Now, one thing to acknowledge here, some could question the legitimacy of his record, as he has fought some cans, and he did have 2 wins removed in the past few months. One for a mixed rules fight and the other overturned by the promoter as a premature stoppage, so a bit suspect there, but he isn't a fraud like Askar Nazarov. If you remember, the Ukrainian light heavyweight who had a completely falsified record, a ton of falsified fights, and got absolutely smoked in his one and only UFC fight against Alonzo Menefield, who rightfully blasted him with elbows from Crucifix to earn the quick first-round TKO. Now, why is Nursulton legit? Well, because of his UFC debut. He took on the undefeated middleweight Brunno Ferreira, who was fresh off a first-round knockout over the uber-talented RoboCop Gregory Rodriguez. Brunno came into the Nursulton fight at 10-0 with all 10 wins by knockout. And what did Nursulton do? Well, he did what he does best. He knocked out Brunno Ferreira in the very first round with a perfectly timed right cross to counter Bruno's leg kick, and put him out with the super necessary ground and pound.
Super necessary.
The knockout showed Ruziboev's power, size, and finishing prowess were not just flukes on the Eastern European MMA scene, but very legit and lethal on the big UFC stage. The win also meant a lot to him, as he and his coaches were very emotional, celebrating the knockout. A little sus grab there by his coach, but I digress. Looking at Ruziboev's strengths, he clearly has tremendous finishing instincts, confirmed with 31 finishes in his 33 wins. His size at middleweight is another element to behold, and will likely be a nightmare for future UFC opponents, as it's been for his past opponents. And finally, that rangy attack that we see on the feet also translates to the ground, where his submission skills and willingness to chain attacks together lends itself dangerous in all situations, regardless of the position, from bottom, half guard, side control, etc. Now, if we look at Ruziboev's weaknesses, he does settle for bottom position quite a bit, a little too much for my liking. He's obviously looking to attack triangles, Kimuras, armbars, submissions from bottom, etc. But if you find yourself in those situations for too long, especially in the UFC, you'll quickly lose rounds and risk taking damage or losing a fight from ground and pound against a competent grappler or wrestler. Second thing, his takedown defense is lackluster. He does do a good job of threatening Kimuras on takedown entries, but again, similar to jumping guillotine, if you don't get the submission or reverse position, you're going to end up on bottom. Last thing is cardio. We know you can dump a ton of adrenaline going for the finish when your opponent is hurt or just looking for a finish in general, and when 24 out of your 33 wins end in round 1, how often are you testing your cardio? Not a ton. Against upper level, middleweights, in the UFC specifically, cardio would be a question mark for me. And then recklessness too. He's not extremely reckless, but in order to finish fights, you got to put yourself in the fire more times than not, and Ruziboev is willing to do so. So I'd say he needs to stay composed and disciplined against top opposition in the UFC. Ruziboev is back in action this weekend against Sedriques Dumas, who's looked okay. He's looked decent in the UFC. Now, I'm not too high on Dumas' skills. He's very inexperienced and raw in MMA, but he does have sneaky good head kicks from both lead leg and rear leg. So Nursulton definitely needs to watch out for that, but I fully expect him to win this fight and no doubt finish this fight. So if you're looking for exciting finishers and potential future contenders at middleweight, keep an eye on Uzbekistan's Nursulton Ruziboev.